Hello and welcome to our channel. In today's video, we're going to dive into the centuries-old mystery surrounding one of history's most legendary folk heroes, Robin Hood. Was there ever a real person behind the myth, or is Robin Hood simply a fictional character of medieval legend? Let's find out in this video. The legendary figure of Robin Hood has captured the imagination of generations, but attempts to uncover the true origins and identity of this folk hero have proven evasive. The quest to ascertain the historical authenticity of Robin Hood is akin to untangling a complex web of fragmented records, literary embellishments, and oral traditions that have accumulated over centuries. While the historical record offers tantalizing glimpses and clues, any definitive evidence regarding a real Robin Hood remains frustratingly elusive. This raises a central question that has long intrigued scholars. Was Robin Hood a real medieval outlaw, or merely a romantic figment of legend? The earliest known references to Robin Hood appear in the 14th century, over 150 years after the purported setting of his tales in the 1190s during the reign of King Richard Bess. This already casts doubt on the idea that Robin Hood was a real contemporary of Richard the Lionheart. William Langland's 1377 poem The Vision of Piers Plowman contains a passing mention of rhymes of Robin Hood, suggesting the legend was already well established in oral tradition by this time. Further references appear in legal records and court rolls dating between 1226 and 1394, with fugitives sometimes listed under names like Robin Hood, Rabun Hod, or Robe Hod. However, historians debate whether these are true references to the outlaw or simply generic surnames taken from the existing legend. The Robin Hood recorded on the Yorkshire Assize rolls of 1261 as a fugitive, for example, bears the statement for breach of the peace in 1272, likely too late a date for the legendary Robin Hood active in the 1190s. While tantalizing, these scattered written references fail to confirm any definitive biographical details regarding a historical outlaw behind the legend of Robin Hood. They do indicate the tales were circulating for over a century before more structured literary accounts began to take shape in the 15th century. Two early ballads, Robin Hood and the Monk, dated around 1450, and Robin Hood and the Potter from c. 1475, represent some of the first known attempts to record the oral traditions in writing. These popular songs and stories were likely embellished over generations before being set in print. King John and his troubled reign. One intriguing aspect of the Robin Hood legend is its frequent association with King John, who ruled England from 1199 to 1216 between the reigns of his brother Richard the Lionheart and his son Henry III. The turmoil and despotism that marked much of John's tenure would seem to provide an ideal setting for the emergence of a heroic outlaw defending common people against tyranny. In early versions, Robin Hood is described as being pardoned by King Richard and taking up his banditry in loyalty to the absent monarch after Prince John assumed power. This aligns with the far more favorable popular image of King Richard the Lionheart as a brave and heroic warrior king, contrasted with the weak and vindictive rule of King John. Adding Robin Hood as an antagonist of the villainous John serves both to embed the legend in a specific time period and provide social commentary on good versus evil rulers. Even if invented, Robin Hood as a heroic champion of justice opposing the corruption of a tyrannical monarch resonated with medieval audiences and added moral legitimacy. King John certainly presided over a tumultuous period in English history rife with political turmoil and conflict. His disastrous military failures led to English defeats by the French and the loss of Normandy, weakening the Angevin Empire. John imposed hugely unpopular taxes to fund his wars, such as the 1207 tenth levied on all revenues. Nobles bristled under his heavy-handed rule, which along with high taxes led to a revolt by the northern barons. John was even excommunicated for a time by Pope Innocent III during a papal power struggle with England placed under interdict. Conditions were certainly ripe in John's England for the growth of legends centered on commoners and outlaws resisting abuses of feudal authority and excessive taxation by the king. The oppression and unrest of the time provides a compelling background for the appeal of a heroic outlaw fighting injustice. The evolving tales of Robin Hood. As an oral legend, the tales of Robin Hood evolved gradually over generations before first appearing in literary form. In the process, they absorbed mythic elements from folklore motifs like the Green Man and Little John's companion, the Jolly Giant. Ballads and stories circulated as popular entertainment, with minstrels and storytellers adapting the legends to appeal to new audiences. The tales therefore exist in many variant forms rather than any single definitive narrative. The earliest written account is generally considered to be Robin Hood and the Monk, penned around 1450 and drawing on established traditions. In this lengthy ballad, Robin Hood robs a travelling monk and slays him after the duplicitous monk betrays him to the sheriff. It features familiar characters, including Little John, Much the Miller's son, and Will Scarlet, and makes no mention of Maid Marian or Robin's love interest. Scholars see Robin Hood and the Monk as a transitional work retaining artifacts of oral tradition while taking steps towards a structured literary form. The later ballad, Robin Hood and the Potter, from c. 1475, builds upon these foundations. It continues the theme of Robin Hood tricking personas of authority, in this case, duping a potter by trading clothes and selling the potter's goods before posing as a fellow craftsman. Robin Hood and the Potter incorporates other well-known motifs like Robin Hood's unmatched archery skills and the safe refuge of the merry men in Sherwood Forest from the power and punch of the law. The early printed texts, with the introduction of the printing press to England around 1475, the Robin Hood legends transitioned from oral retellings and handwritten manuscripts into printed anthologies. Among the earliest published accounts was Robin Hood and Little John, along with the aforementioned Robin Hood and the Potter in William Copeland's printing between 1515–1560. Robin Hood and the Friar similarly appeared in printed form around this time, while the prolific printer Wynkyn de Worde published Robin Hood and the Sheriff in the early 16th century. These popular anthologies gathered and fixed the English oral and literary traditions in affordable printed form for the first time. Standard themes and conventions emerged across the various tales, such as Robin Hood and his merry men poaching the king's deer in Sherwood Forest and evading capture by the Sheriff of Nottingham. Robin competes in archery contests, courts Lady Marian, and faces down belligerent knights to protect commoners from harm and extortion. Print introduced more consistency to the legends while spreading them to wider audiences across England. Robin Hood on the early modern stage. Another major vector for dissemination of the Robin Hood stories was the theatre. As early forms of English drama developed in the 16th century, Robin Hood was quickly adapted for the stage. Plays like Robin Hood and Little John, c. 1505–1510, drew upon similar themes as the ballads but incorporated staging, props, and conflict scenes that proved popular with audiences. In fact, Robin Hood is considered to be one of the earliest English outlaw heroes adapted to the stage. Amateur dramatic productions called Robin Hood Games continued the legend and were especially popular during May Day festivals and summer months when poaching restrictions were relaxed. Professional acting troupes also adopted the outlaw character between the 1570s and 1590s. References to multiple plays titled Robin Hood throughout this period suggest an ongoing comic theatrical tradition. Robin Hood's story clearly appealed to all levels of Elizabethan drama. Scholars debate exactly how much these creative stage adaptations may have diverged from or influenced the oral and printed accounts in circulation at the time. But Robin Hood's widespread presence in early English theatre indicates the legendary outlaw's firm embedding in popular culture during the 16th century. Once established on stage, Robin Hood would continue as a perennial figure adapted in theatrical forms ranging from comedies to opera for centuries to come. Identifying a historical Robin Hood. Historians have long tried to corroborate whether some real outlaw or band of outlaws might lie at the heart of the Robin Hood legend. But attempts to pin down the historical Robin Hood have proven frustrating. Matters are complicated by the fact Robert or Robin were exceedingly common names in medieval England, making links to the legendary figure speculative. For example, records show Robert Hood or Hod exiled from Wakefield, Yorkshire, and eventually imprisoned in London in 1318. But there is no evidence this was the Robin Hood of renown. Efforts in the 17th century to definitively establish Robin Hood as a historical figure focused on Robert Fitzooth, Earl of Huntingdon, said to have been active in opposing Prince John between 1193–1194. But later, historians found no such earl existed, and Fitzooth to be a fanciful name fabricated to lend legitimacy to oral tradition. Prominent American historian J.C. Holt in 1982 concluded Robin Hood was solely the creation of the ballad makers. The names Robin Hood or Robe Hod do appear across dozens of medieval records between 1226 and 1396 in reference to criminals, fugitives, and bandits, but in no case do these documents confirm. These are mention of the famous outlaw. They offer no supporting details linking them to the Sherwood legend. At best, they indicate Robin Hood as a popular term for common outlaws, which may have influenced the legend, but direct evidence remains elusive. The search for the real Robin Hood. Modern historians have thus shifted focus to searching for echoes of a real Robin Hood in the cronies and characters populating the stories. While Robin himself may be mythical, aspects like his feud with the Sheriff of Nottingham or his companions Little John and Will Scarlet could have roots in actual medieval outlaws. Place name evidence indicates the major settings associated with Robin Hood, like Sherwood Forest and Barnesdale, were real havens for outlaws and centres of resistance against Norman rule. Finds of remarkably preserved medieval longbows give credence to the tales of Robin Hood's deadly archery skills. Real bands of outlaws and poachers did in fact plunder wealthy travellers and abbey monks while cultivating legends among local peasants that could protect them. Even if Robin Hood himself never existed, the types of people and deeds in his stories certainly did in the heavily wooded and lawless regions of medieval England. The historical backdrop of Richard the Lionheart's absence during the Crusades, Prince John's abuses as regent, and Baron's rebellion against the monarchy root the Robin Hood tales in real periods of turmoil. The oppressive Sheriff of Nottingham character also fits with the actual duties of early sheriffs to collect taxes, enforce the forest laws, and hunt down fugitives. Archetypes and relationships in the legends mirror genuine medieval conditions and power dynamics, the seeds of truth underlying the myth. Ultimately, the real Robin Hood remains as elusive as the fictional outlaw hero himself, impossible to definitively identify despite centuries of scholarly pursuit.